Hi, everybody. Welcome to Friday Live. This is our 11th episode, and welcome to the show. I'm Jack Forster, editor-in-chief of Hodinkee.com, and I'm here with...
Cara Barrett, editor at Hodinkee.
Great to see you all. As we always do, at the beginning of the show, we like to remind people that we will be taking questions from you folks. So if you head to Hodinkee.com, check out the article that we just published, and drop down to the bottom, leave your comments for us. We will try to get to as many of them as we can.
Yeah.
And let's take a look at what happened this week. Not a super crazy week in watch news, but a few things going on.
Yeah, we had National Moon Day yesterday.
Yeah, we had National Moon Day yesterday. Now, as it turns out, this is not like National Mustard Week or National Pretzel
National Ice Cream Day.
National Ice Cream Day.
Actually, I don't know why there is a National Ice Cream Day. Maybe there is a reason.
I mean, there probably should
maybe
just be.
Maybe it was invented on that day.
Yeah, maybe.
I'll look that up after this.
One of those things to dig into.
Yeah.
As it turns out, though, of course, National Moon Day is National Moon Day because that's the day that the first men landed on the moon, Apollo 11, touchdown, and Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin walked on the moon. So we have a National Moon Day to celebrate. Looked at a few moon phase watches, moon-related stories, and we're still feeling a little bit of the leftover excitement, I think.
Definitely, and some moon dust also sold at auction yesterday.
Which is not a watch story per se, but we thought it was kind of an interesting thing to look at, just to see, how provenance and collectability can affect prices for things. So this was a sample bag. That went for $1.8 million at Sotheby's, and it's probably one of the more important nylon bags in the history of nylon bags. It was used to bring samples home from the moon, bring moon dust home from the moon by Neil Armstrong, and it's just it went for that much money, obviously because of where it had been, not because of what it was made of.
Right. Yeah. It's just a bag of dust at the end of the day.
At the end of the day, yeah.
But a cool bag of dust.
And not even a whole lot of dust.
Not even a whole lot of dust. How much was it?
$1.8 million.
No, but how much dust?
Oh, microscopic amounts.
Okay.
I think NASA said traces.
Oh, so nothing at all.
Right. The other thing, in somewhat more watch-related news, the other thing that we heard this week was, as you all probably know, Mr. Georges Kern, formerly the watch boss at IWC, departed somewhat abruptly and unexpectedly last week. It was widely rumored that he was going to go to Breitling, and since then, obviously, that has been confirmed. Mr. Kern will be the CEO of Breitling. We don't know when he's going to start, but we do know that that's where he's going to be moving forward. Obviously, this is a gentleman who enjoys a public-facing job.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah.
Loves it.
And I think he likes to think of himself as something of an activist CEO. So I think this is going to be a good place for him.
Yeah, I think it's a good natural fit for him.
Yeah. Certainly a chance to shine, as they say.
Yeah, and we'll see what he does with the brand. I think it's going to be really exciting to see what watches he comes up with and kind of the direction that he takes the company in.
Yeah.
So I think it'll be great. But
So we're halfway through the year, more or less, right now.
Yes.
And at this point in the watch year, pretty much not every major new release has happened, but a lot of major new releases have happened, the vast majority. And we thought we'd take a look at some of our favorites. Now, again, there have been so many hundreds of watches released that I think coming up with a top 10 or a top 5 list is a little bit artificial. So we just thought we'd take a look at a few that we each thought were particularly interesting.
Yeah. Do you want to start, or do you want me to start?
I'll jump right in. So my first, and actually this is one of my favorites, but it's also it is actually one of my top 3. Seiko made Grand Seiko a separate brand this year. The Grand Seiko historical reeditions came out 3 watches that were basically resurrections, so to speak, of designs of original Grand Seiko watches. And my personal favorite, the gold was beautiful, the platinum was beautiful, but for sort of sheer day-to-day wearability, I really love the stainless steel reference SBGW 253.
Say that 5 times fast.
Ooh, no, thank you. Ask Louis the next time you see
Oh, yeah, that's a good idea.
And I just think it's a gorgeous watch. Fantastic movement, obviously very wearable, great classic, good looks. It's kind of everything that everyone loves about Grand Seiko. In one package, including a very approachable price point.
Yeah.
And just a super easy watch to love, I thought.
The steel is just under 10,000, isn't it?
No, the steel is actually, I believe it's around 5, but I'd have to go back and check.
I love the platinum one.
Yeah, the platinum is gorgeous.
It's something that you don't think will be as impressive. You're just kind of like, oh yeah, cool platinum, but then you try it on and you're like, oh no, feels very different.
Yeah, I think they're all 3 fantastic. Obviously, at very different price points for the precious metal models. But the steel won my heart.
Yeah, it's a good bang for your buck too.
Another watch that I thought was really, really impressive this year was from Vacheron Constantine, obviously at a wildly different price point. This is the Vacheron Constantine Celestia.
Opposite end of the spectrum.
Yeah, you could, in just about every respect. So this is super, super high-end watchmaking. This is the kind of watch that it would have been virtually impossible to make as a wristwatch until maybe 30, 20 years ago, just because of the degree of miniaturization involved. It's surprisingly small for a watch with so many complications, so many astronomical complications. And I thought one of the cool things about it, aside from the sort of engineering aspect, is just, aesthetically, it's kind of a combination of every major astronomical complication that there is. And it's a sort of a God's eye view of the local universe, the position of the moon with respect to the Earth, position of the sun, tides, star chart, the whole 9 yards. Just a gorgeous, gorgeous watch.
Yeah, no, it was really incredible.
Yeah. And Vacheron is a little vague about the price.
Well,
in excess of 1 billion euros is pretty much all I could get out of them.
Really?
Yeah. So that's a lot of Grand Seikos.
Yeah, yes. You could provide Grand Seikos probably for all of our readers.
And then some.
And then some.
Last one that I thought was really cool was only announced last week, and this was the Patek Philippe reference 5531R. This is the World Time Minute Repeater.
Yep.
Which Patek debuted in conjunction with the Art of Watches Grand Exhibition.
Yeah.
There were a bunch of new watches that were announced. A lot of them were focused on rear handcrafts. Of course, there was the steel pilot's watch that got everybody talking. That was kind of a love it or hate it watch. But I'm pretty sure they're going to fly off the shelves if they haven't flown already.
They may have already flown.
Yeah. And the thing that was cool about the 5531R, as I said last week, is nobody's ever done this before. So to have a minute repeater in combination with a world timer, so that the repeater actually chimes the correct time for whatever your local time zone is, that's completely new, which is always a tricky thing to say in watchmaking, because the minute you say it, somebody pulls like Grandpapa's previously unknown movement that he took 80 years to make out of a drawer somewhere in Lachlan. It's you don't have a first anymore, but this looks like the real deal. Looks like a real first.
No, and they're beautiful in person. At the exhibition, they looked great on display, and unfortunately, we couldn't try any of them on, but
next time.
Next time.
So, Cara, so did you pick 3 that you that you liked, or are these actually your 3 favorites? Or
They're pretty close to my favorite. It's hard to pick a favorite because all watches are like children. You can't really say you have a favorite. But for me, this year, I really loved the Panthère de Cartier. I thought that was a really great revival for the brand. They already have the Tank, which I'm sure is probably one of the most popular watches ever made, and then the Panthère is probably in close second. It was originally came out in the early 80s and went away in the early 2000s. So it's back with a bang, and it's just it's just a very good everyday watch for a woman, I think. And they came rose gold, yellow gold, two-tone, steel, medium, small, large, extra small, all different kinds of sizes. So for anyone, they can pick what they want.
Do you think it rivals I know it doesn't have the history that the Tank does, obviously, but do you think that it rivals it just as a sort of, style icon, as a design icon?
I think it's not as well known, but I do think there are 2 schools. There's people who love the Tank and people who love the Panthère. But I will say I might see the Panthère a little bit more than I see the Tank these days, which I think is really interesting. I think people prefer the bracelet, and because the links it's really comfortable in the way that they're created. The links are kind of curved, so it's not super heavy, but it still feels really sturdy. So I think that
we actually had one of the small gold models in the office, and I have to admit, I thought the bracelet looked so luscious. I put it on, and it was small.
You
but
wanted
it was
to be
fun
like Keith Richards, and in which
more
he
ways
did
than
have
one.
by the way.
Yeah.
There's a picture of it. And then, I think it's a great watch. I loved it. My next one was the Little Longa One Moon Phase, which had the guilloche dial. And for me, I just thought it was, the name is adorable, Little Longa One.
Little Longa One.
It's not that little, though. It's 36.8 millimeters.
Yeah.
So it's pretty average size.
Do you think it resents being called little?
Here we are. No, I don't think it resents being called Linger. It's probably okay. But the dial is really, beautiful, and it has a moon phase. And it's Moon Week now officially. Yes. So I thought that was fitting.
If you're gonna love that watch, this is the week.
And then another moon phase, which I just realized I clearly love moon phases, Rolex Cellini moon phase, because the Cellini line has never really been one a line that like I've ever been drawn to. And when I saw this at Basel, I thought it was a really interesting new thing, and it kind of like stepped the game up a little bit in that collection.
Yep.
It's also the first moon phase that Rolex has done since the 50s with the 8171 and the 6062.
And now, which I thought was super interesting, and something honestly, until you mentioned it yesterday, I had completely missed about that model.
Yeah.
I just had never thought about the fact that it represents something. Everyone always says, "Oh, I wish Rolex would bring back some of the complications," and here they actually have, and for the first time in quite a while.
It kind of was under the radar. I feel like not that many people acknowledged that or thought about it, but like the 8171 and the 6062 really were only in production for like 3 years, so they're really rare, and you really don't they come up at auction and they go for crazy prices.
They go for crazy money, right?
Yeah. And so to have this come back, I thought was a really smart idea, and it was really well executed because there are a lot of shitty moon phases out there, and this one was not one of those. I just cursed on live.
Yes.
Sorry.
Second time.
Sorry, Mom. And yeah, so I think I really liked it.
Yeah. Any particular kind of trends that you see that you are seeing either from these or just in general?
Well, I'm against the trend by my choices here, but the trend I saw was the whole revival of vintage designs and faux patina. That was the trend that I saw this year.
Yes.
And a lot more just watches for the masses, like people that I think sometimes the past brands got a little like carried away and trying to prove that they could do all these cool and crazy things, but at the end of the day, people want to buy watches they can wear. Yeah, and people want to be able to afford to buy watches that they can wear, and so I think that's something that's kind of come back lately.
Yeah, I mean, kind of related to that, and a little bit related to my choices, as well. I think that there is a real attempt on the part of a lot of brands to kind of, build more, perceived value into their offerings at the sort of entry to, mid-entry point. Like, Stephen yesterday did a piece on the, on a Tissot with it's under
really nice
$1,000 bucks. It's 80-hour power reserve, silicon balance spring. There's a lot going on there technically,
Yeah.
and that's actually offering a lot, to customers for not a particularly high price. And then at the high end, I mean, to me, the two benchmark high end, or two of the high-end real benchmark watches this year were the Celestia and the Patek World Time Minute Repeater.
Yeah.
But in between, there's this kind of gap, where you see these classic models with kind of incremental changes going on. But it's a little bit, because prices in that segment have crept up so much over the last 20 or so years. I think it's harder to sort of carry the flag for greater perceived value without making it seem like you're abandoning your recent past a little bit.
Yeah.
So I think that might be a tricky segment.
Yeah, I think you might be right. What was the price on the 5531 again? Because I know the ladies' minute repeater is $500,000.
Quite a lot of money.
Yeah.
It's about $500,000.
Yeah.
A little of $535,000 if I remember correctly.
Which is crazy because the ladies' minute repeater is the same price.
Yes.
And it's only a minute repeater.
Right.
Just kidding. Minute repeaters are complicated.
They are.
Especially for Patek.
Yeah.
But yeah, so what is in the safe this week? What do you have?
Well, I've got. I'm working with two watches this week, which could not be more different from each other, unless I guess maybe if one of them were quartz. So the first one that I want to look at is this is one of the largest dive watches I think I've ever worked with professionally.
Yeah, that's big.
It's a big guy. Very, very eye-catching design. You notice a lot of things about it. At first, you notice the two crowns. You notice that there's only one hand, the size and geometry of the case. So who is this from? This is from Facheron, and this is their Raider Harpoon watch.
Did you learn that pronunciation from Louis?
No, negative, sir. Picked it up all by myself.
Oh, good job.
There's probably a Frenchman who corrected me at some point.
Yeah, probably. He's like,
oh. It's got a 500-meter water resistance. As we know, this is about as deep as professional saturation divers can go. Not a whole lot of those guys wearing watches, while they're actually getting wet, but that's theoretically where this watch could go. Helium release valve. One of the interesting things about it is, as you'll notice, there is no hour hand. So we've got a small running seconds indication right here in the center of the dial, and the minute hand actually points to what the hour is, and the distance between where the minute hand is from 1 hour to the next is roughly the number of minutes past the hour. So as the minute hand goes around the dial, when it gets to the top of when it gets to the 12 o'clock position, it's pointing directly at, if it's 6 o'clock, the number 6. It goes around the dial one more time, and at 7 o'clock, it's pointing to the number 7, and it travels in between the numbers 6 and 7 as the minute hand travels. So
awesome.
yeah, and for a diver, I think the rationale for that was let's get all the clutter out of the way that might keep you from seeing the minute hand, which is the thing that is actually critical when you're diving. So it's an elaborate way to do it, but I thought an interesting strategy.
Very cool. Are you going to make it your new daily wear?
I'm going to try and see how that feels.
Yeah. I'm excited to hear about that.
So big guy.
Yeah.
The other watch that I have to work with, which is as I said, kind of diametrically opposed to the Fabre. This is a really, really wonderful, I think, I'm giving the game away a little bit. This is a really wonderful Vacheron Constantine. It is just called a 36 millimeter small patrimony, and so it's a 36 millimeter watch. And this is the kind of thing that, people who got interested in watches roughly when I did, maybe a little bit older, maybe a little bit younger. It's a 36 millimeter automatic dress watch. It has a movement in it, the caliber 2450. Very interesting thing about this. Now, everyone knows that Vacheron Constantine is a true manufacturer. They make a lot of stuff in-house. They make in-house movements. Interestingly enough, they did not make their own first in-house self-winding movement until 2007, and this was it. So, something that I kind of like to talk about, when looking at some of the more classic movements from Swiss watchmaking is this is the kind of watchmaking that you used to see all the time. You wouldn't necessarily go to the trouble of making an in-house movement, when there are a lot of high-grade movements out there that you could bring in. So what this really represents is a transition from that way of making watches to the newer way of making watches, where you do try to do everything in-house. And again, it's 2007. It's a 10-year-old movement, and it does really, really well in this beautiful, thin, everything you need, nothing you don't, men's or women's dress watch.
Yeah, it's a really beautiful piece.
Yeah, yeah. And you've got something pretty interesting as well.
This week I have the Longa annual calendar 1815 that was released earlier this year in white gold. I'm doing a week on the wrist with it, so keep an eye out for that in the next few weeks. And I wore it for a couple days already, and not today, but in the past few days. And I have to say, it's honestly one of the most comfortable watches I've ever worn.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You would think with a complication like this that it would be, and the white gold, and it's 40 millimeters, so it's big, and you're kind of like, it's probably not. No, it's comfortable.
Yeah, I mean, the one criticism that you occasionally hear about Longa is certainly no one ever faults them on finish or
Oh no, of course, yeah, everything's impeccable.
Some of their, especially some of the complicated watches, have gotten to be a little bit on the large side, usually for a very good reason. The Longa 31 is as big as it is because it's a 31-day watch with a giant mainspring.
Right.
But this is a really fantastic size.
Yeah, it's amazing, and it feels really casual, even though it's about $39,000, which is not a casual price. And it wears really well, and it's so easy to set. I think a lot of times complicated watches can be intimidating for people because you're kind of like, you have to maybe have someone in the boutique explain to you how to set it. I mean, obviously none of our readers, everyone is exceptionally well versed in that, but I have only good things to say about it so far.
How do you feel about the whole, and Patek came out with the first annual calendar wristwatch in the late 1990s.
Yeah.
A lot of people seemed to feel that the annual calendar was kind of a, it was kind of a compromise. It wasn't one thing or the other. Either have a simple calendar or have a full-on perpetual.
Right.
Why would you fiddle with an annual calendar? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, just so we're clear, the perpetual calendar, it accounts for the leap year, and the
right.
annual calendar does not. So you have to reset it every year.
Right.
I mean, I think it's fine. I think, it's nice to account for a leap year, but as you know, it only happens every 4 years.
Right. And,
so,
I mean, with an annual calendar, you fix it once a year at the end of every February. And
and then that's it. So, I mean, I'm okay with it. I think it still serves the purpose. It has the moon phase. It tells you the day. It tells you the time. It gives you all the information that you need. It gives it to you. So.
At a fraction of the complexity and potential breakability of a moon phase.
Yeah, but
I
also wouldn't say no to a perpetual calendar.
Yeah.
So.
All right.
That's how I feel. I love it.
Now, we're going to do our very first point counterpoint segment.
Yeah.
We're going to look at where we take a look at an issue, and there are many, in watches and how we relate to them. We're going to look at both sides of the question, and we thought we'd start out this week by looking at how we keep watches attached to our wrists.
Yes, not a date window discussion.
Not a date window discussion.
Because Jack and I are in agreement.
Yeah, unfortunately. So we got to find someone who hates date windows.
Yeah.
So what we're going to be looking at this week is the whole question of folding clasp. In French it's called a boucle déployante, which just means folding clasp. Or
Are
folding
you French?
buckle. Negative.
Oh, you sound French.
I'm good at imitating things. Versus a pin buckle. So, obviously we all know what that is. Now, just a little bit of history. The boucle déployante, the folding clasp, was actually, as it appears in its modern form, it was patented by Cartier in the very early 1900s. Obviously, it's used all over the place now. And people seem to feel pretty strongly one way or the other. I personally favor a pin buckle. Cara favors the boucle déployante.
I do. I just think, so do you want me to start with why I like the deployant? So for me, I like the deployant because it makes everything feel snug and secure. And when you're putting on your watch, there's no chance of it dropping. See?
Right.
And then when you do a pin buckle, you have to put it on. See, I'm not very good at it. And you have to hold it against
we're in trouble already.
yourself to do it, and then you're fiddling with it, and look, I can't even do it. Look, we're already, everyone's bored.
Yeah.
Can't even put it on.
Yeah.
So that's how I feel about pin buckles.
Yeah, the thing that I don't like about deployants is I just think they add a lot of extra bulk to the strap. I think that and often they're used when they're not really necessary. And I mean, I hear what you're saying, Cara, but honestly,
But you have
I
a
feel like the
deployant
whole, I feel like the whole greater convenience and greater safety thing. It's a little bit exaggerated.
It's overrated until you smash your watch on the floor.
Yeah, but I've never smashed a watch on the floor. And would a deployant really stop me from doing that? Maybe, but I find pin buckles generally
Should
pretty.
I time this on my chronograph?
I find pin buckles generally
Starting
pretty
now.
easy to negotiate. Easy on, easy off, easy to adjust. Oh, that's the other thing that I absolutely can't stand about deployants. Changing the length of the strap is kind of a pain in the neck.
Okay.
Isn't it?
It is.
Right.
And to be clear, maybe I prefer bracelets over straps.
Maybe you prefer. Oh boy.
So that might be the difference.
You actually prefer a bracelet to a strap.
Yes.
Yeah.
So if we're going down the
hierarchy.
it's bracelet, strap,
Yeah.
but bracelet deployant.
Right.
All bracelets are deployant.
Bracelet.
So maybe that's my problem.
Yeah, you prefer a bracelet.
I just prefer a bracelet.
Okay.
So this argument may
So it goes bracelet,
have
strap.
weakened.
Fitbit, Spidell.
Fitbit, no, I would never wear a Fitbit. No offense to anyone who wears Fitbit. But yeah, no, I just think, like I've heard so many stories from people who have put watches on with pin buckles and they drop them.
Yeah. I'm not saying it can't happen. I'm just saying that
Yeah.
I personally think paying a little bit of attention when you're putting your watch on is a fair trade-off for not having all of that extra bulk. And the other thing about deployants is that they kind of dictate the curvature of the strap to you. So the strap, it doesn't hug the wrist as nicely as it should.
But I will say, in my time, I have worn deployant buckles on straps, and it was specifically with the Cartier watch.
Mm-hmm.
They make a really good, I think their deployant clasp with the leather strap is the best.
Yeah.
Because it's very thin, and the way that it's very small.
But maybe that's a conceptual thing with you. Like, Cartier invented the deployant, so you're like, I'm wearing a folding clasp made by the company that invented the folding clasp.
I think they may just make the best deployant buckle.
You sure you're not just talking yourself into thinking that this is true?
I know I'm right.
You're going to stand behind that?
I'm going to 100% stand behind it.
All right. Oh, one last thing. Something that we occasionally have people ask us is it correct to say deployment buckle?
Oh.
And in fact, it is not correct to say deployment buckle. Deployment is something that you do with troops.
Yes.
Déployante is a French word. It means folding. So it's probably fine to pronounce it however you want, but it's a French word with a specific meaning.
Yeah.
And deployment, while similar sounding, means something completely different.
Yeah, and I think Ben covered that in his watch newbie.
Watch mistakes.
noob.
Watch noobs should
Yeah.
make. Yeah.
Isn't noob a great word? I don't know. It's so funny.
That can be our next counterpoint. All right. Having gone through that, we have now reached our reader. Let's take a look at reader questions.
Yeah.
See what you guys want to know. We're just gonna punch up our little look at. All right, let's see what we've got. All right, Cara, you let me know what you think about this one. It seems like a new limited edition watch is released every day to commemorate some new milestone or event. Have limited edition watches, which are often anything but limited, become so superfluous as to be entirely unimportant?
I do have thoughts on this.
Uh-oh.
So, I think there's a way to do a limited edition, and there's a way not to do a limited edition. I think a limited edition has to be an actual limited number of pieces that is not over, I don't know what, 500?
Yeah.
I think when you start having limited editions of like 10,000 watches, then it's not special anymore.
Yeah.
And I think that you do have to be careful about like specific brands. I think you're right. And they come out with ones like every month, every week. I feel like I'm always getting a new press release. And sometimes the watches themselves are not that different. And so I think they do lose their special feeling. Yeah. But I do think I think if you do come out with something genuinely interesting and unusual that has not been done before, or is a special, dial that they only did 100 pieces for, like, I think that's fine and really cool, because then it does make the buyer feel it makes you feel special, because you're one of 100 people that have this watch.
Right.
And it's kind of like it's like a little bit of a bragging, right? You're kind of like, yeah, I have this limited edition. What?
I mean, so what you're saying basically is it boils down to a limited edition they should feel actually limited.
Yes.
And they should feel like they exist for a reason.
Yes.
Yeah.
And special.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
All right.
I don't
think anybody would disagree.
Because otherwise they're not.
No, I absolutely agree with you. I don't think anybody could possibly argue with that. The only thing that I think in addition to that is brands that make large numbers of limited editions, if they do it year after year after year after year, these things are obviously selling to somebody. And this kind of raises to me the bigger question of how things look from an enthusiast perspective versus what's actually selling out there.
Yeah.
And sometimes we forget there can be a big gap between the two.
I think you're right. Yeah. That's a good point.
All right, let's see what else we got.
Yeah.
Here's an interesting one. Why aren't more perpetual calendars out there that can be set entirely from the crown? Why are there so many that you still have to set with correctors?
I'm going to let you lead the way on that one.
All right, so here's the thing. Making a perpetual calendar that you can set from the crown is actually technically quite difficult. You have a bunch of different parts inside a perpetual calendar that all have to be able to talk to each other in order for a perpetual calendar to do what it does, which is know exactly what the correct date is, including dates at the end of every month, whether it's 30 or 31 days. It also has to know the correct date for the end of February, even in a leap year.
Right.
And typically, it also has to switch day indications, day of the week indications, a moon phase, and so on and so forth. The most straightforward way to do this for a couple of hundred years was to simply have all of these functions kind of independent from independent one from the other to a certain extent, and to get them to all talk to each other through a series of gears, so that you could actually just change all of the indications from the crown in a coordinated fashion. This didn't happen until Kurt Klaus invented what is now known as the Kurt Klaus perpetual calendar mechanism for IWC in the 1980s. First came out in the Da Vinci perpetual calendars, and it was nobody was able to develop a perpetual calendar where you could actually safely set the time forwards or backwards until Ulysse Nardin came out with their the perpetual Ludwig, named after Dr. Ludwig Oestlin, in the late 1990s. So the simple answer is the reason that there aren't more is because it's hard to do, and there are time-honored practices and designs that a lot of traditional brands still use to this day that make sense for them and kind of represent an ongoing tradition of complications making that's a couple hundred years old.
I would also imagine it would allow for the piece to be more fragile. Like I would think that maybe if it was all the controls came from one spot, then it would somehow, I don't know, break
Yeah,
more
you would
easily.
think. I mean, the
Because like, what if you
perpetual
like
calendars
accidentally
that you
pull it
can
all the way out?
well, the perpetual calendars you can set from the crown. I mean, since it's a perpetual calendar, once it's set, and if it's automatic, you keep it on a winder. If you're wearing it on a daily basis, you wind it every day.
Yeah.
So it's not really, you're not going to touch the crown all that much, anyway.
I guess you're right.
And the real problem with traditional perpetual calendars is it's possible to damage them if you try to set them, backwards across midnight, for example, is the classic thing that you do not, under any circumstances, do with a traditional perpetual.
I also kind of like the setting pins.
Yeah. It's a little
cute.
It's not rational, but it's a sort of a fun, shout out to the way things used to be done.
Yeah, I like them.
All right.
Any more?
Yeah, I think we got time for one more. Let's see what else we got. Cara, Daytona, Oyster Flex, or bracelet? Your take.
Bracelet. But the Oyster Flex is pretty cool.
Yeah.
Because I think it has a piece of metal inside it, and it's flexible.
It's beautifully made.
It's very well made.
Yeah.
I just like the uniformity of the way that the steel from the case, or whatever metal it is, continues on with the bracelet. I also like a little extra bling with my watches, and I feel like a steel bracelet from Rolex gives that.
Yeah. If you're going to wear a watch where part of
bling.
if you're going to wear a watch where part of the fun is, that it's a little on the showy side, and nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
You kind of feel like in for a dime, in for a dollar.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
All right. Okay, last one. I just happened to see this one, and it's a fairly quick answer. Is there a way to fix a chronograph hour hand that does not reset to the 0 position?
Oh, yeah.
So the fast answer to this is yes, absolutely. There's a way to fix it. Typically, what watch hands are held in place, they're friction fit. So you've got a little post that comes up through the dial, and the hand is just stuck on it. The only thing that's holding it in place is friction. 99 times out of 100, it's absolutely fine. It doesn't create any problems. But with chronographs, when you reset all the indications, the hands move a lot faster than watch hands normally do. And every once in a while, a hand can slip on the post a little bit. And that's the reason typically for a chronograph hand, whether it's the seconds hand, the minute hand, or the hour hand, not resetting to 0.
Yeah. We've had some good questions this week.
Yeah, some great stuff. All right, so that's I think we're out of time.
Yeah.
But thank you all for all your questions. The ones we didn't get to today, we'll try to get to either in the comments. So look for our answers there, or we'll try to answer some next week. And we'll see you next Friday when we are live again with Friday Live.
Thanks for joining us. Bye.